Hello and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Appeal. Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. We begin the news in North America. Former President Donald Trump visited a McDonald's franchise in Pennsylvania on Sunday, working a drive-thru and manning the fryer while he answered questions from reporters. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris celebrated her birthday at two churches in Georgia, continuing her campaign's Soul to the Polls push to reach black voters through religious communities. News Central's international correspondent Afua Hagan has more.
May God bless you and may God...
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have been ramping up personal attacks on each other as the White House rivals blitzed battleground states just 16 days before the election.
Nice and clean.
In Pennsylvania, Trump served fries at McDonald's as he sought to cast doubt on Harris's biographical detail about having worked decades ago at the fast food chain. He again accused Harris of lying about having once worked at McDonald's.
Now I have worked at McDonald's. I've now worked for 15 minutes more than Kamala. Okay, she never worked here. I've now worked 15 minutes more than Kamala. So.
On Sunday, Harris celebrated her 60th birthday and gave an interview to MSNBC, whose host asked her about Trump's remark at a rally in Pennsylvania, where he talked about what kind of vice president she was and used an expletive. Harris said Trump's language demeans the office of the presidency. Earlier in the day, after superstar Stevie Wonder sung his famous Happy Birthday song to her, she told a congregation of black churchgoers in Atlanta, Georgia, to vote against chaos, fear and hate, personified, she suggested, by her Republican rival.
We have to remind people the power they have in spite of those that would try to diminish and make people feel powerless. In spite of those who would try and suggest that, oh, if you vote, nothing will happen. For sure, if you don't vote, nothing will happen. I mean, recently I was reminded Jimmy Carter voted on his 100th birthday. Seems to me everybody can vote.
Meanwhile, Elon Musk, the billionaire founder of Tesla and SpaceX, who has been campaigning for Trump, pledged to give away $1 million a day to voters who sign his petition backing the U.S. Constitution. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a Democrat, said the plan was deeply concerning and that law enforcement should potentially look into the matter. Polls show the two candidates locked in a razor-tight race across the country, including in the 7 battleground states that could swing the election. Both candidates will continue making their final pitches today. Harris will embark on a whirlwind tour of Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin. Trump will head to the hurricane-stricken town of Asheville, North Carolina, before holding a rally in the town of Greenville. For News Central, I'm Afua Hagan.
And still for more on this, I'm joined by international correspondent Afua Hagan. Afua, good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. So first off, the interactions between both parties is getting more and more personal. Donald Trump is serving fries, and then Kamala Harris, well, she's celebrating birthdays, yet keeping it formal. However, there's Elon Musk, who's pledged $1 million giveaway every single day, and I'm very interested to know exactly what this is about, Afua.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a 1 million naira giveaway. It's a $1 million giveaway every single day. And this has caused a bit of controversy. Now, what this is Elon Musk, who's been campaigning very heavily for Donald Trump, is he's giving $1 million a day away at random to someone who pledges to sign up to his petition, which supports the U.S. Constitution, particularly the First and Second Amendments. So what this is not not necessarily paying someone for their vote for Trump, but it is rewarding people who sign up as a registered voter and then sign his petition. Now, you have to be a registered voter to sign his petition. And so this has caused some consternation because it is illegal to pay people to sign up to vote. So if essentially he gives away $1 million tomorrow to someone who just signed up to vote and then signed his petition, that could be deemed illegal. And you saw Josh Shapiro earlier on today. He has been talking and saying that we really need to look at what he calls the dark forces and the dark money that's going into this election and now pouring into Pennsylvania, because that's where someone won yesterday. So Elon Musk, ever the controversial figure, continuing to be controversial whilst he's on the campaign trail for Donald Trump.
Okay, now let's talk about Trump himself, whose personal attacks on Harris are becoming practical. I mean, he's serving fries at McDonald's now. What's been the reaction to these antiques?
Well, yes, Donald Trump has always been quite personal in his remarks about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And over the weekend, he gave an interview where he talked about, he was at a rally, where he talked about what kind of president Kamala Harris was. And he basically said she was a terrible president, but if you substitute terrible for an expletive, which I'm not going to use here, then you have a measure of what he said. Now, Kamala Harris responded in an interview with MSNBC and basically saying that he is bringing down standards in public life, and this isn't fitting for someone who deems to sit in the office of the president and in the White House. He was also talking about a legendary golfer and made some pretty strange remarks about this Arnold Palmer, about his anatomy, and then he justified a previous threat that he had said about military enemies from within. And it just seems that these remarks that he's making are getting more and more personal and more out of hand. And where this might appeal to his core base, the people that already know him, already love him, and will already vote for him, it could put off kind of middle America and sort of your white Republican housewives who might see Donald Trump speaking like this and be more put off for him and be more inclined to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris and the Democrats are saying that this is actually essentially a symptom of his cognitive decline, that he's exhausted, he's unstable, and he's unfit to run for president, never mind be president at all.
Well, call it what you may, it's still a very tight race. There's still people who support him very strongly. So what's the latest on the polls with this race between the two?
A tight race indeed. Now, the poll of polls that I looked at just before we came on air is telling us that Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump with an average of just 2 points nationwide. That is well within the margin of error. So right now, the poll of polls tells us that Harris is on 49.1% of the votes and Trump is on 47.1% of the votes. Only 2% difference, and like I said, well within the margin of error. If we look at the swing states and the electoral college, that kind of complicated system of voting that decides on the election, Harris leads in swing states with 36 electoral college votes versus 27 for Trump, and 31 states effectively tied. So sort of 15 days out from the election, it remains very tight indeed.
Oh, I want to say thank you very much, Afua, for joining us. And of course, you know who to call if you need some fries. Thank you, Afua.
Absolutely.
Now, away from that, Havana residents have taken to the streets, banging pots and pans to protest the government's handling of a nationwide power outage, now stretching into its third day. Meanwhile, Energy and Mining Minister Vincent de la O'Levy has announced that electricity services are expected to be restored by the evening of the 21st of October for most of the nation, which was hit by a massive blackout just days before the anticipated arrival of Hurricane Oscar.
Pero cuando falta la electricidad, es impotencia. El cubano no puede generar la electricidad. Depende de que te entreguen la electricidad. Y además, sin electricidad, entonces no hay agua, no hay producción de medicamentos, no hay recolección de alimentos. Es decir, la electricidad es transversal y lo toca a todo. Y crea molestia. Crea molestia a todos. Con ellos, pero hemos tenido comunicación países como Colombia, como México, como Venezuela, que han tenido, como Rusia, que se están comunicando con nosotros permanentemente y están pidiendo que le digamos en qué podemos apoyar y estamos.
In South America, UN Chief Antonio Guterres urges significant investment in a fund created to safeguard Earth's biodiversity as he addresses delegates to COP16, the world's biggest nature protection conference in Cali, Colombia. The Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, GBFF, was created last year to help countries achieve the goals of the so-called Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, adopted in Canada in 2022, with 23 targets to halt and reverse the loss of nature by 2030. According to the monitoring agency, countries have made about $250 million in commitments to the fund. And now we're going on a short break. When we come back, we'll tell you Israel launches new wave of airstrikes on southern Beirut. Join us then. You're welcome back. In the Middle East, the Israeli military has once again targeted various areas of Lebanon, including civilian infrastructure. The Zionist strikes also hit very close to the capital's international airport, according to media reports. Hundreds of Beirut residents fled their homes after Israel said it was preparing to attack the country and told people to leave those areas immediately. Soon after the Israeli warning, several blasts were heard and fires was seen in Beirut's southern suburbs. According to Lebanon's health ministry, at least 16 people were killed and 59 wounded in Israel's airstrikes. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has headed back to the Middle East on Monday on a new push for an elusive Gaza ceasefire 2 weeks before U.S. elections, seeing a new opportunity from Israel's killing of Hamas leader. It will be the 11th trip to the Middle East by the top U.S. diplomat since war broke out a year ago, with Blinken on his last visit to Israel in August, warning it may have been the last chance for a U.S.-led ceasefire plan. That push did not succeed, and the conflict has escalated and expanded since then, with Israel pounding Hezbollah targets in Lebanon and warning of a new airstrike directly on Iran, whose clerical leaders back both Hamas and Hezbollah.
Secretary will be wheels up a little later this afternoon, heading to Israel and other countries in the Middle East. In Israel, the Secretary will reaffirm the United States ironclad commitment to Israel's security and emphasize advancing enduring peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Throughout the region, Secretary Blinken will discuss the importance of bringing the war in Gaza to an end, securing the release of all hostages, and alleviating the suffering of the Palestinian people.
Let's also tell you that Iran has on Monday denied an accusation from Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati that it was interfering in Beirut's internal affairs over remarks attributed to Tehran's Speaker of Parliament. Recall that on Thursday, Iran's Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf was quoted by France Le Figaro as saying that his government was prepared to negotiate its implementation. The resolution calls for the Lebanese army and UN peacekeepers to be the only forces deployed to southern Lebanon. In a rare rebuke of Tehran, Mikati accused it of blatant interference in Lebanese affairs and an attempt to establish an unacceptable guardianship over Lebanon.
با لبنان و موضع ایران در رابطه با لبنان و مقاومت روشن هست. جمهوری اسلامی ایران هیچ وقت قصد و نیت و هیچ عملی که شبهه دخالت در امور داخلی لبنان یا هر کشور دیگه‌ای داشته باشه را انجام نداده.
Iran has unveiled a new ballistic missile and an upgraded one-way attack drone at a military parade amid rising regional tension and accusations of supplying arms to Russia. New President Masoud Pezeshkian attended the annual parade in Tehran, which commemorated the 1980-88 war with Saddam Hussein's Iraq.
امروز ایران ما قدرت دفاعیش، توان بازدارندگیش آنچنان رشد کرده که هیچ اهریمنی جسارت این که تفکر این که بخواهد به خاک عزیز ما تجاوز کند در ذهنش هم نمیتونه. روز ما میتوانیم به دنیا با قدرت اعلام بکنیم که قادریم علاوه بر این که از کشور خود دفاع کنیم، با وحدت و انسجام با کشورهای اسلامی و با دست دادن و همراهی کردن با این عزیزان منطقه خود را در صلح و امنیت و آرامش نگه داریم. اسرائیل غاصب را، اسرائیل خونخوار را، اسرائیل نسل کش را، اسرائیلی که به زن و بچه و مرد و پیر و جوان رحم نمیکنه، با وحدت و انسجام به جای خود بنشانیم.
Meanwhile, in Europe, King Charles' visit to the Australian Parliament was interrupted by Indigenous Senator Lydia Thorpe's anti-colonial slogans shout, shocking assembled lawmakers and other dignitaries. The independent lawmaker requested that the monarch relinquish the Australian lands taken from them as she decried what she described as a genocide of Indigenous Australians by European settlers. Australia was a British colony for more than 100 years, during which time thousands of Aboriginal Australians were killed and entire communities displaced. The country gained de facto independence in 1901, but has never become a truly fully fledged republic. King Charles is the current head of state. South Korea has summoned the Russian ambassador demanding the immediate withdrawal of North Korean troops, which it says are being trained to fight in Ukraine. According to Seoul's intelligence agencies, around 1,500 North Korean soldiers, including members of the special forces, have already arrived in Russia. During a meeting with Ambassador Georgy Zinoviev, South Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Hong-kyun denounced the move and warned that Seoul would respond with all measures available. In Asia, Vietnam's army commander Long Chong has become the nation's fourth president in less than 2 years after receiving overwhelming approval from the rubber-stamped parliament. The president in Vietnam holds a largely ceremonial role in the country's four-pillar leadership structure. Chong's takeover from To Lam, who has usually held the position alongside his role as general secretary.
Toàn tâm toàn ý dưới cờ đỏ sao vàng thiêng liêng của Tổ quốc, trước Quốc hội và đồng bào cử tri cả nước, tôi Lương Cường, Chủ tịch nước Cộng hòa xã hội chủ nghĩa Việt Nam, xin tuyên thệ tuyệt đối trung thành với Tổ quốc, với nhân dân, nỗ lực hết mình phấn đấu hoàn thành tốt nhiệm vụ Chủ tịch nước theo hiến pháp nước Cộng hòa xã hội chủ nghĩa Việt Nam.
Finally, India and China have reached an agreement on military patrols along their disputed Himalayan border, which could pave the way for resolving a conflict that began in 2020. On Monday, Indian Ministry of External Affairs announced that both sides had agreed on disengagement and the resolution of issues that arose in the border areas in 2020.
Over the last several weeks, Indian and Chinese diplomatic and military negotiators have been in close contact with each other in a variety of forums. And as a result of these discussions, agreement has been arrived at on patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control in the India-China border areas, leading to disengagement and a resolution of the issues that had arisen in these areas.
And that's all on Beyond the Continent. Now, do remember that you can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Able TV, and on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.